Queenstown, famous for its record-setting HDBs and equally profitable condos. But did you know that it's the 6th most oversupplied MRT station in Singapore? And because of that, the performances of condos in Queenstown can vary greatly. We have a freehold development that is within walking distance of the MRT, still losing money even after 11 years. While some of the newer 99-year condos can use some of the best returns across the entire Singapore. And even an old 99 years condo that managed to yield its owner more than $600,000 in profit on just a $1.5 million purchase price that is in excess of 8% annualized gains over just a short 4 years holding period. And also the question on everyone's mind, how does Penrith compare to the other launches? We're going to break down all of this in this video utilizing our data-driven, back-tested exit strategy framework. And before we begin, if you enjoy content like that, we'll be really thankful if you can hit that like and subscribe button as you'll help out the channel a ton. Now, before you rule out Queenstown simply because of the oversupply thing I mentioned early on in this video, if you look at the research that we have done across all 137 MRT stations in Singapore, the average profitability across all 4,000 units in Queenstown stands at still a very impressive 3.76%. Comparing that with some of the more popular areas in recent times, the Great Wall and the Orchard Boulevard, the average profitability there stands at 2.56%. So the analysis has to go deeper than simply the supply in an area. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the correlation between the supply and profits in a particular area, you could check out our oversupply video. I'm going to put that link somewhere over here or down in the description. Or if you'd like to take a look at the research that we have done, feel free to drop us a text. We'll be happy to send it over to you. Now, let us analyze the performance of the existing condos in Queenstown and see if they can help us predict the performance of Penrith. And let's get into it. So what I've done is to consolidate all the transaction data across all the condos within 1 km of Queenstown MRT in the last 12 months. And I put it into here, broken down into the individual condos, and consolidated them into this sheet. We are starting off with Alexis, which is the example that I gave earlier on in the video, a freehold development within walking distance to Queenstown MRT, freehold cheaper than 99 years. If you first look at it, by right, it should do well. And here's an interesting story. When I first got started 10 years back, Alexis was one of the first condos I analyzed. And you know, if you just look at it like that, it should do well. Thankfully, I didn't go for it because if not, you know, I wouldn't be where I am right now in terms of my property journey. Now, importantly is to try to understand, right, what caused Alexis's underperformance despite all the positive attributes in terms of its price, in terms of its location. The only thing left really is the quality of the product, okay? So it was built in an era with plenty of bay windows, right? If you want to jump into one of the layouts, I could share it over here. Look at the two-bedder, bay windows, bay windows, bay windows, bay windows, planter boxes, bay windows. The bedrooms, the width like that, if they show you like that, only can fit in a single bed. I guess you could put in a queen bed, but then you got to crawl over the other person sleeping in the queen bed and you may not be able to close the door. So yeah, terrible layouts all around. And majority of the units were one-bedders. Okay, one-bedders and two-bedders form almost about 300 units that the development itself is only 300 units in size. So based on the looks of it, 293 units actually is not that bad considering it's close to the MRT, but it's all studio apartments, 300 over square feet and two-bedders, right? So that's the main reason for its underperformance. Okay, next up, Queensway Tower. Okay, so this is also a freehold development. The details over here. Queensway Tower, freehold development, but just 78 units. For those who don't know, this is on top of Queensway Shopping Centre. For those of you who, you know, like to buy your soccer boots, your running shoes. A lot of them are hoping for en bloc for this, but you know, if you read the news, follow the news, the chances of en bloc is very, very low because I think the sports shops apparently quite wealthy and they are buying up a lot of their neighbors and they have a very high share value and they don't want to sell their shop. They want to retain their presence in the area because I suppose if they have to replace it into another mall and whatnot, they have to pay rental. Currently, they can't own the space. I'm not going to talk too much about it, right? Because small development, yes, they have some pretty good performances. Actually one of the better performances, but on the back of very low transaction value, just one transaction, yes, can make 1.1 million, 4.9 annualized, but it's it's insufficient to really give us a very strong data point, right? So I'm going to move on next then to the Anchorage. Okay, the Anchorage, big also, I believe it's 999 years of freehold at the Anchorage. Large development, 775 units. It's perhaps the second oldest after Queensway Towers. One of the earliest iterations of mixed-use development is connected to Anchor Point. Do very, very well as well, right? One bedder, 4.6% annualized. Two bedders, 3.9% annualized, but their two bedders are very big, about 1,300 square feet. There are 475 three bedders hovering in at the 3 million price point. Very good size, 1,529 square feet, average 4.4% annualized, and you're not really going to find four bedders, just 33 of them. So Anchorage is one of my favorites, especially in terms of resale for the area, due to its freehold status linked to the the mall, right? And also not too far from the MRT, about 2 to 3 stops you can hit the MRT already. Yeah, but great amount of amenities in and around that area. Okay, then we have the big brother in the area, Sterling Residences. TOP right after COVID about 3 years back. 1,259 units. It's perhaps the best performing development in that area, despite it being launched as the most expensive one in that area at that point in time. Okay, so even the one bedders are averaging 3.7% annualized. The two bedders do well, 4.4% annualized. If you strip out Queensway Towers due to its just 2 transactions, right? It ranks second after Queens. Okay. But here's what I want to see, right? It's just 72 transactions, you still can average 4.4%. It's very, very good. Okay. We have 263 three-bedders. Okay, with 8 transactions, it can still average 6.3%, making it the best performing 3-bedder development in Queenstown. Okay, and in 4-bedders, annualized 6.8%, right? With 3 transactions, average $1 million in profit. Also, the best performing in Queenstown are also the 4-bedders at Sterling Residences. Okay, so I would say the big brother in that area. Generally, the people looking to move into the area, they start off their search first with Sterling Residences. Okay, the next one, the Queens. So this is the example I gave earlier on in the video, a slightly older 99 years development. Let me just take a quick look at how old actually it is. Queens, TOP 2002, the lease starts from 1998. Okay, so it's a good 23 years from TOP already. Okay, but let's take a look at the performance. There's no one bedder, 72 two-bedders. However, just one transaction, but with that one transaction, they make close to $1 million. I believe they held for quite long to make that kind of money. But despite the amount of time that it's been held for, they still average 4.5% annualized. The three-bedders, okay, we have 565 of them, right? They're averaging about $2 million in quantum, 15 transactions over the last year. So it's very, very healthy. They're averaging about also close to $1 million in profit, 4.9%. Now, 4.9% annualized for a 23-year-old development is fantastic. And not to mention, it's because it's right next to the MRT, the rental yield is also very, very good. So Queens is actually one of the case studies I like to use when analyzing slightly older 99-year developments. So what does this tell us? So if it's a 99-year development, even if it's slightly older, okay, you can still use very decent profits. More importantly is to be very, very certain with the location. Yeah, so this is a great thing to think about if you are maybe limited with budget, but you still want to upgrade, have a little bit of concerns with 99-year leasehold. I'm here to tell you that if you buy a good development, you don't have to worry so much. Yeah, 4-bedders, 83 units, 3 transactions, average profitability of 1.488 million, 4.2%. So very, very strong. We've seen the newer 99 years that do well. We've seen the older 99 years that do well, and the freehold ones that do well as well. So across the board, the different types of developments, they all seem to do well in Queenstown, right? We have Queen's Peak and Commonwealth Towers. Queen's Peak TOP about the same time as Sterling Residences and Margaret Ville, right? They're all quite large. Queen's Peak and Commonwealth Towers are all quite large. They are coming in at 700 over units. Commonwealth Towers 845 units. They all perform quite well as well, right? Commonwealth Towers, the one bedders maybe not so much at 2.2% because the layouts over there some have a little bit of an odd angle. Queen's Peak have a little bit of an odd balcony, but yet they still do well purely because of their location. There are two bedders. Queen's Peak do better. Then Commonwealth Towers at 4% analyzed versus 3.3%, but then still quite good. Here, Commonwealth Towers is the three bedders that is where it start to pull away because Commonwealth Towers three bedders they then become a lot more regular, right? Queen's Peak, some of the complaints with the three bedders is the bedrooms are quite small. Some of the bedrooms cannot fit in a queen size bed, hence causing a drag on its performance. But once you go to the four bedders, the two of them start to even out. Okay, I want to bring our attention more towards Margaret Ville because in terms of unit size, it's closest to Penrith. Okay, so Margaret Ville, if you can see over here, 309 units. Penrith likely to come in at about 400 over units, right? Will be the two smaller developments in this Queenstown area, of course not considering Alexis. So the question really would be, would we lean more towards the performance of Margaret Ville, or would we enjoy the strong performance of Sterling Residences, Queen's Peak and Commonwealth Towers? Because if you look at Margaret Ville's one bedder underperformed its neighbours quite significantly at lower than 2%. Their two bedders are also underperforming its neighbours, right? If you compare to Queen's Peak at 4%, even Commonwealth Towers at 3.3%, Sterling Residences at 4.4%, it's 1.1% lower than that of what you would expect at Sterling Residences. But once it comes down to the 3 and 4 bedders, the annualized gets narrower, not too bad. It underperforms Sterling even more, but it closes the gap to things like Commonwealth Towers and Queen's Peak but it actually surpasses Queen's Peak, okay? But still underperforming the rest, okay? When it comes to the 4 bedders, it still underperforms Sterling, but it balances, it closes the gap slightly with Queen's Peak and Commonwealth Towers. Now, what is the reason for Margaret Ville's underperformance, right? It's from a good developer, MCL. The quality of the finishes were great. The time when I went to see the show flat a couple of years back, the quality of finishes were great. So if you ask me, the primary reason for its underperformance boils down to two things, right? First, the small number of units gives it a high maintenance fee, okay? People don't really look at it due to its distance from the MRT and its smaller size. Second, really, it's like what I said earlier, the distance to the MRT. I believe it's about 2 to 3 stops if I'm not wrong, okay? Versus its competition that is very, very close to the MRT. The demand, right? It would take you very, very long for the demand to trickle down into looking at Margaret Ville, because if they land there, first thing they go Commonwealth Towers, Queen's Peak right beside the MRT. Nothing good, they go to Sterling Residences because everybody talks about Sterling Residences. Cannot find any Sterling Residences, maybe then they go to Margaret Ville. Okay, so now, important question, which one will Penrith lean towards? Okay, Penrith being about 400 odd units, it was smaller than Queen's Peak, Commonwealth Towers and Sterling Residences, but still larger than Margaret Ville. But good thing, saving grace, is that it will be closer to the MRT. So if you ask me, I think the performance will link a bit closer to Sterling, Commonwealth Towers and Queen's Peak. I just don't know whether it will surpass them, okay? But it should do better than Margaret Ville. Now, let us put all that information into our exit strategy framework to allow us to see what the exit strategy for Penrith is like. For those of you joining us for the first time, do check out this video, and I'm going to put that link also in the description, where we elaborate in detail why and how we develop our exit strategy framework. In short, we wanted to find the most data-driven way possible to evaluate the exit strategy of a particular project, and also to allow us to compare projects on an apple-to-apple basis. And we have back-tested this with the projects from 2018, and it seemed to have worked pretty well. That said, this is still a work in progress and we're happy to have your opinions on how we can make it better. So let us know in the comments. Now, let's take a look. So I'm going to first run through some of the parameters that we are using, okay, and the reasons why we use these parameters, starting first off with the price, right? So no price have been released yet, but I've put in 2,700 PSF because I guess that is where they're going to average into. Likely in terms of indicative prices, they may start off a lot lower just to bring in the attention, right? It still surprises me at how much people get excited over indicative prices, because it's always tested and proven that indicative prices are perhaps applicable to 1 to 2 units and everything else is only going to be more expensive, right? And especially for Penrith, right? Because they have two different facings, one facing the HDB flat and one facing the unblocked greenery. So in all likelihood, the difference in PSF from there might potentially be 50 even towards 100 PSF difference. So giving the developers a chance to have a very, very attractive indicative price for the HDB facing and then load the prices aggressively towards the greenery facing. So just for the sake of it, we're going to put 2,700. But of course, you know, as the project launches and as the analysis runs deeper, we have more information, we will tweak this as we go. Yeah. Quantums is as a function of the size of units. We have not get confirmation on exact sizes of units yet, right? But these are some of the sizes that I think it might come out to. Next up, we use average profitability per annum. Okay, why? Is because I think this is the best indication for demand. Whenever people ask or question me whether or not there's demand or not in the area, I just simply look at profitability, because end of the day, if an area is easy to sell, if the demand is high, it's easy to sell, naturally the profits will be high, right? But if an area is hard to sell, less demand, right, owners will then take a longer time to sell, hence eating into their profits by reducing prices, right? Naturally giving you lower profitability, right? So all you need to do is look at profitability to tell you the demand. Yeah, and we use average profitability per annum because this equalizes through the different unit sizes and more importantly, the holding period. Because I'm not a fan when people use like just how much profits in terms of quantums, because in all likelihood some of the older condos, especially if you have larger units, will have a lot bigger profits, right? You've got to then break them down in annualized gains. Yeah. Second, right, is current units for sale in this area. So just to give you an indication, so we look in that area and we try to see how many units are available for sale. Of course, this number changes day to day, right? So it's changed to 104. Then now let's just change that number quickly to 104. All right. Total supply of units, right? So this is the total supply of 2-bedders being built. Where we get this number comes from this sheet. Okay, so as you can see over here, we've already put Penrith how many 2-bedders we predict Penrith to have, and that is all the units being built. Yeah, so I use two different data points for supply because at the end of the day, even if an area has high supply, right, like for example the 3-bedders, we have 2,000 units of 3-bedders being built, but only 17 3-compacts for sale. This is then truly the supply ratio that matters. And it doesn't matter, right? What if an area has very low supply of 3-bedders, but 20% of it is for sale? Very naturally, then that might be even more oversupplied than areas that can have a lot of 3-bedders built, but very little 3-bedders for sale. Case in point, if you're going to look at, let's say, the Normanton Park area, yeah, compared to Queenstown, Normanton Park standalone might have lesser 3-bedders as compared to the Queenstown vicinity, right? But they have a lot higher number of 3-bedder by proportion for sale, okay? Next, right, we look at average quantum, average median and highest quantum achieved in that area, right? And then we compare that to what's our expected entry price, okay? Next is also the PSF, right? Current average median and highest achieved PSF in the area as compared to our potential entry PSF, hence giving us a gap score. So for both the exit score and the gap score, you are hoping to achieve as low a number as possible, okay? And if for gap scores, right, usually when you go to the RCR and OCR, they tend to have a positive gap score. You just try to come as close to 0 as possible. But in terms of the some of the CCR units, right, if you can see some of our new launch comparisons, once you go into the CCR like River Valley or even District 15, where their older supply sized very, very large, very, very big, they have much higher quantums. okay, as what is potentially launched, you then may potentially end up with negative gap scores. So if you go and run into the negative, similarly as negative as possible, it's better that way. Now let us then start to look at the score. For anything less than 100 or close to 100, it's good. But then again, right, we've only been doing this for about 2 years. That is simply based on the data that we've collected over the 2 years. The closer you come to 100, the better. And this is also based on the back test that we have done from the batch of the 2018 new launches, your Park Esta, Sterling Residences, Affinity, all those lah. Okay, so let's take a look. 2-bed, 2-bath. In terms of preliminary release, they won't be building any 1-bedders and also no 2-bed, 1-baths. Okay, so if you have a budget of less than 1.6, I reckon, I think there's no point waiting for Penrith. Likely prices will be maybe indicative, might start at 1.6 or 1.59x, right? But so less than 1.59, I think it's going to be very tough for you to enter. Minimum 2-bed, 2-bath. Okay, potential entry price, let's say 1.65. Okay, in that area, the supply is a little bit on the high side, right? Hence giving a score like that, right? But then again, we've sold a couple of units at Sterling Residences. This supply gets absorbed up very, very quickly, and they are of course a lot more price sensitive on that note. The Sterling Residences units that we have sold on the higher floor tend to move a lot quicker. So this may be a nice little tip for those of you looking to, into Penrith, right? Higher floors, while they command a premium, right? Then the golden question is how much premium, right? Take for example, recently in the 2 launches, right? Springleaf Residences, Promenade Peak, right? The loading per floor level was very, very gentle, so to speak, right? Less than 0.5% per floor. But in River Green, the loading per floor level was actually a lot more aggressive, right? So the strategy, right, when the loading is not that high, is to go as high as you can based on your budget. But if the loading is very, very high, then you might have to be prepared to walk away once you come to need to high floor, especially looking for it for pure investment, right? Then also you might want to consider swapping out to a slightly lower floor on a slightly larger unit size, right? Once you go overly high. Okay, so that's why it's very, very important to start kind of plan out your strategy before the balloting day itself. So this is likely going to be the average price, so I'm kind of predicting this to be like low to mid, very, very decent entry below the average in that area. Of course, in terms of PSF, you're likely going to be higher lah, right? So if you're going to higher PSF, all in all, you want to go into an area that's a lot more stable, and Queenstown is perhaps one of the most stable areas around. Okay, now moving on to the 3 compact, right? Likely 7-8. Initial concerns with 3-bedders at 786, but if you've seen the take-up rates over at River Green, the take-up rates over at there's no concerns at all, right? Because honestly, in my opinion, this GFA harmonization thing has kind of forced architects and developers to be extremely creative and extremely efficient with their layouts, right? So if you really ask me, some of these 786, 818 layouts are not worse than some of the 900 square feet layouts from the non-harmonized era. So don't let this number affect you or block you from even considering it off. Of course, the budget allows get something bigger, right? That's great, right? But if your budget is limited, don't let this affect you, okay? Because this is basically a repeat of the eras where the 900 square feet 3-bedders first came out. People are a bit concerned because people are always used to the 1,000 square feet. Then the 900 square feet came out today. You try to find 900 square feet 3-bedders in your Park Esta, Sterling Residence, Park Clementes. It's also super hard to find, right? People have already came to accept it, and it's just a matter of time before people have come to accept the 700 odd square feet 3-bedders, right? And the scoring over here is fantastic, right? 4.7% annualized for the 3-bedders in Queens on average, okay? Just 17 or 28 units of 3 premium, 3 compacts for sale with a supply of close to 2,000 units. As a comparison for this, okay, we look at 3-bedders over in, let's say, River Valley, right? The last popular area, the supply ratio, it's 5.3%. Compared to the supply ratio here, it's 0.8%. So it's, despite 2,000 units built, very, very little for sale. What does that mean for you? Okay, it means that if you are somebody that's looking to have a closer to 4-year exit time frame, this might be a better choice than River Valley. Okay. Now, next up, right? But the one thing that it loses out really, it's the gap. Because in River Valley, you have a negative gap score compared to your neighbors in the surrounding area, right? You are 800, 700, 4 million below. Naturally, once you go into the ask, you can still be below the average over there. Actually, below the average is considered very good already, but most of the time, you're actually above the average, right? So is this going to be a deal breaker? Answer is no. As long as you have still scores like that is, below 50 and whatnot, I'm not overly concerned with being above the average. Of course, you just try not to be like double, triple the average lah. So that's for the 3 bedders, right? If we look at the 4 bedders, my favorite actually, it's this really nice compact 4-bedder over here. Excellent scores, okay? 5%. I would say that is perhaps the best exit score we can find anywhere. However, the gap score is a little bit on the higher side as compared to, let's say, a 3 compact, right? Because the average, the highest we're going to get in terms of 4-bedders over at the Queenstown area is kind of 3.3 mil. So even if you enter at 3.1 mil, it's just 200k below that. But that being said, I think that's still very much okay. Now, of course, if you look at it may not give you a whole lot of clarity, right? That's why the most important thing is kind of comparing this to some of the other launches. So what I've done is we have a 1-bedder, 2-bedder, 3-bedder, 4-bedder comparison, right? With all the recent launches, including the upcoming Sky on Holland, even also the Tampines West. We are in the process of doing Faber Walk as well. Now, if you want to take a look at this, feel free to drop us a text. We're happy to share it with you. In the spirit of trying to keep the videos a little shorter, maybe I just flash you guys the 3-bedders. Yeah, so if you can see over here, the River Valley ones, their exit score is about 155% for the 3-bedders compared to Penrith 118, right? Sky and Holland is about 50, Alta is about 61, Tampines West 33, actually very, very interesting. Because primarily those areas, their supply ratio is a lot lower, as you can see, a lot lower, and profitability is actually quite a fair bit higher than the River Valley area. That's it. River Valley will usually beat out in terms of the gap score. You know for sure people have already paid a certain price for 3-bedders in the area. The further out you go, usually the higher the gap score, right? Which kind of makes Tampines West actually really, really interesting, right? Especially if they can come in at this kind of new 700 square feet 3-bedders. Is very, very interesting to me. Okay, again, right, if you'd like to have a look at this, drop us a text, happy to share. Also, we can share with you some of the comparisons that we do for, personal clients of ours. So they kind of give us a short list of like, I have between a budget of $3 to $5 million. We'll find all the $3 to $5 million ones, and then we'll start comparing them against one another. And so this is something that we'll do for our clients that onboard directly with us. Okay, if there's something that you're looking for, again, right, feel free to drop us a text. Now that we have done with the quantitative analysis for the exit strategy of Penrith, let's take a look at some of the qualitative analysis that you got to do when it comes to selecting a project, okay? So first of all, some of the other factors that you want to consider that we haven't put inside that spreadsheet, right? Size of development, transformation in the area. Of course, right, this is what you want to do when you're comparing, say, different projects against one another lah. Not so much within the condo itself, okay? You want to check, are there any new plots in and around that area, right? Will one development with new plots in and around the area be better than a development with no new plots in that area? The age of the developments, the rental yields, especially if you are an investor. If you're looking for your own stay, of course, schools, MRTs, amenities, it's important. If you're looking to expand your portfolio, right, it's important to then consider the potential holding periods, okay? So for example, something with that has lesser schools, but a lot more transformation, those tends to take a longer holding period before you can exit. Something like One Marina Gardens versus, say, something like Penrith, for example. That fundamentally, it has a much better exit score, right, with more data points over there, right? It can mean a shorter potential holding period. Yeah. Portfolio sizing, is this the most optimized pick for your portfolio? Some of our clients have come to us and said, should I be spending, I have a budget between 2 to 2.5 mil. Okay, so how much should I spend? What's the best, most optimized amount to spend? So sometimes it's not necessary to spend the most amount of money, especially, right? Especially if you're doing rent to rent, right? You are selling your current property, you go out to rent to buy a new launch for investment, right? It's getting a lot more popular nowadays. If that's the case, sometimes you may not want to stretch the budget to the maximum, right? Because you got to leave yourself with a little bit of buffer in case of a rainy day, right? Especially because you have already a sunk cost in terms of rental. Another kind of questions when it comes to portfolio optimization, portfolio sizing, it's when you are decoupling, right? Should you spend 1.5 to $2 million? What is the range, right? We just had a client recently, original budget of between 1.5 to 1.7, but eventually we kind of decided good Q number, went for a budget of just $1.4 million. All in all, still great portfolio sizing. We kind of balanced off the strong entry price with the need to just make the most out of their potential leverage, right? Because we determined that 4 years, 5 years from now, they may potentially be selling to consolidate their assets together to buy one big one for their own stay. So all of these are the different deeper layer analysis to consider when you come to a particular project, a particular purchase, especially when you're looking at it from a portfolio perspective, right? So we also have opportunity cost again, right? Most of the time, especially for first-time home buyers, right? Opportunity cost, which one can give you a better return as compared to, let's say, your stocks investment, right? Your CAGR, for example, of 8 to 10%, can this particular development give you that, right? So how do we utilize our exit strategy framework from that? A lot of the times then we will look more so at the gap score, right? Developments with a higher gap score gives you a stronger certainty that prices can hit a certain price point, right? For exit, to kind of reconcile your opportunity cost in terms of CAGR, right? We also have exit timing. This is something that I really want to talk about in a little bit more detail, okay? So here's the thing. I'm not sure whether how many of you go and check Treasure at Tampines, track the supply for Treasure at Tampines. Now, 4 years back, everybody was so concerned that it would be impossible to sell your units at Treasure at Tampines because there's 2,200 units. But now, if you go in and see, I believe the other day I just popped in to see like 4 premiums. I believe there's like 2 to 3 units for sale only, right? But just 1 year ago, that supply was easily 10 to 15 units. Now, which one do you think will maximize your profits for you? Okay, so now this then comes in the play in terms of exit timing. Sometimes it's not the most ideal situation to sell right at TOP. Okay, sometimes it's good to rent it out for a little bit, let the supply come off before you sell. So on this part, which is why we track current supply, current unit for sale extremely closely, right? Because this in a way also tells you whether or not it's a good time to sell. Okay. So now, once we boil down to it, right, once we zoom into, let's say, a particular project, just the interesting thing, right, this exit strategy framework also works for resale, right? It doesn't work for just new launches, okay? Then you want to go into check out competitor analysis, how the layouts, how the layouts compare to its competitors, within the development, which are the better layouts, stack selection, PSF gap within the development. Yeah, I think for this one, most of the people know, right? Additionally, if you're going for a ballot, then what's the strategy for balloting day? Now, moving on to the 3 things we like and don't quite like about Penrith. Starting first off with the 3 things we like. So on point number 1 is that there's not going to be any one bidders in Penrith. So what we're going to do is take a look at the unit splits among all the recent 99-year launches of the condos within the vicinity of Queenstown MRT. And we're going to take a look at Queen's Peak, Commonwealth Towers, Sterling Residences, Margaret, Ville, and Penrith. So the unit splits for Penrith is an estimate based on the available information we have right now, but I don't think it should deviate by much. We know for sure there's going to be 2, 3, and 4 bidders. There's not going to be 1 and 5 bidders. Okay, so you can see over here, in terms of Queen's Peak, there's a quarter of the units. There are 1 bidders. In Commonwealth Towers, close to 40% of the units are 1 bidders. Almost half are 1 bidders. Sterling Residences, that percentage came off to just 18%, which might suggest the reason why Sterling Residences consistently outperform all its peers in the Queenstown area. In Margaret it's at 25%, right? So with the percentage at Penrith going down to 0% with no one bidders, that means there's likely going to be a lot more owner-occupiers located within Penrith, hence helping to bring up prices come resale time. Onto the second thing we like about Penrith is how it's going to benefit from the prime location housing scheme. So I'm going to caveat that this might sound quite chim, so try your best to follow. Okay, so for those of you who don't understand the prime location housing scheme, what it means is that all the future BTOs coming into the Queenstown area will be subjected most likely to the prime location housing scheme, the plus housing scheme, right? So all the flats over there will be subjected to the 10-year MOP, the income ceilings, the clawbacks on potential profits. But what a lot of people don't know that is that even in the resale market, the buyers for those units will also have to conform to the 10-year MOP, conform to the similar eligibility rules, and especially the thing it's about the income ceiling. Now, what that does is potentially creating a glass ceiling for a lot of flats in the resale market in the future. And that's not just that, okay? It's going to also strip away demand from the new BTOs. So right now, looking to buy a house in the Queenstown area, okay, before the prime location housing scheme, you kind of have, two options. You can the HDB or you can buy the condo, right? And in the HDB, you can also buy the new or the resale HDB condo, similarly new or resale condo. But moving forward, as long as your income bursts the 14,000, because it's HDB, right? 14,000 limit, all the new BTOs will no longer be an option for you. You are then left with HDBs. And those HDBs are the HDBs from yesteryears. And likely they will be quite old. So if you are somebody that wants to buy something newer, you are essentially left with condominiums. So all future supply coming into the Queenstown area, in my opinion, will move more towards the condos, right? And so for those of them that are looking to buy their first property, okay, don't need a family yet, actually they will move a lot, I feel, towards the two-bedders, right? Entry price, nice two-bedders. They have total debt servicing ratio, so can they loan a little bit more and move the two-bedders as opposed to the aging HDB flats, or if not, they are not even eligible to buy the new HDB flat. So in summary, the prime location housing scheme is going to drive a lot more demand into the private properties located in the areas that are affected by these prime or plus location housing schemes, and Queenstown is definitely one of them. And if you really look deeply into the supply of the condos in the vicinity of Ericchiew and Queenstown, you notice actually a lot of them have suboptimal layouts. I'm going to put a couple of examples onto the screen. So with GFA harmonization coming in for Penrith, and we know GFA harmonization has forced extremely efficient and good layouts, right? This difference of suboptimal layouts for current supply and new efficient and smaller layouts for Penrith may make it an even stronger value proposition for buyers in the resale market moving forward. And if PSFs aren't crazy, which is possible considering that the land cost is quite cheap, the entry price will also be extremely competitive as compared to the resale in the area. I have a bonus like to share, okay? So while a lot of people are under the impression that Queenstown is this mature estate, and with all mature estates it's already pretty much built up, a lot of people don't know that there's actually a lot of land that's being made available for housing purposes. Look at all these plots, subject to future detailed planning, subject to detailed planning. These plots are also available, okay? Subject to future planning, subject to detailed planning, subject to detailed planning over here. And that's a lot of land. Here as well, a lot. Okay? And it's extremely rare for a mature town to have so much future upcoming residential land made available. And of course, right, I do think at least some of them will be made available for condos, right? Even if it's made for HDBs, it's not going to come in and compete with your demand, as I've explained earlier on in the video. Yeah. So all in all these future plots is going to be very exciting and very beneficial to Penrith. Now on to the 3 things we don't quite like about Penrith, and we are coming back again to the URA master plan. Okay, so here's the plot over at Penrith. Okay, so if you're on site right now and you look to the north, it's very, very nice, very, very green. Okay, and I do expect the developers to price a premium towards the north facing units, right, as opposed to the south facing units, because they are pretty much staring straight at the HDBs. Okay, so now what you have to be aware of is that these plots, while they are going to be lower density, right, half of the plot ratio, so essentially half of the height, and do note that they are not yet, right, not yet considered under conservation use, especially all these URA bungalows. Chances of them being redeveloped, while quite low, the fact that they are not conserved gives them a chance of being redeveloped. Okay, you will or should be mentally prepared that there will be future construction coming up to the north. While it's a distance away, it might not impact your livability due to its distance away. And also the fact that there's still going to be so much land for them to use in and around the area, they may not use this too soon. I'm just going to be aware of the premiums I pay towards the north. Okay, and especially if you're on the mid to low floor, because this is going to be half of your height, right? Mid to low floor. Next time, if this guy comes up, your mid floor, your view pretty much would be blocked. Okay, so it's just something to pay attention to. Well, now to the second thing I don't quite like about Penrith is the size of the development. While in other areas, I might consider 400 units to be pretty fair. At 400 odd units, it's going to be the second smallest 99 years development in the Queenstown area, only slightly bigger than Margaret Ville. And if you look at the performance of Margaret Ville, it has underperformed its larger counterparts of Commonwealth Towers, Queen's Peak and Stirling residences. So will Penrith follow the performance of Margaret Ville simply because of that? I don't think so. The saving grace over here is its proximity to the MRT. Now, the thing to be aware of really is then the maintenance fees, because over at Margaret Ville, due to its smaller size, maintenance fees are high, which may face pushback from resale buyers moving forward. So this will be something that I'll be paying close attention to once more information is out. Now on to our third and final point on what we don't quite like about Penrith is the timing of the launch. So Penrith is going to launch on the back of extremely strong take-up rates for launches. We have our Promenade Peak, River Green, followed by Springleaf Residences. They're now coming in at Penrith. So this is on back-to-back strong take-up rates for launches. So I'm expecting a lot of kind of pent-up demand moving into Penrith, because there's still a lot of people in the market, and perhaps if you are watching this video, you are one of them that have not managed to get a unit at some of those launches. The tricky thing over here is that because of the smaller size of the development and it being so highly built up, right, if you don't plan properly, you might fall into FOMO and end up buying at a much higher price than you are mentally prepared to do, had there not been so much FOMO in the market, right? The fact is that there's a lot of FOMO in the market right now. So you have to plan properly in order to, approach the launch in the right way, right? Because as I've seen over at River Green, for example, right, people paying $500,000, $600,000 more for the same unit type on the higher floor, right? If you're buying it for own stay, sure, no issues, right? But if you're buying it because, the ballot number, and when you read your ballot number, that is perhaps one of the last few units that you have, and you're paying 600K above, more expensive than the lower floor ones, my advice is that, you perhaps can consider some of your alternatives, right? So this is a question a lot of people come and ask me, right? Elvin, so what's a walkaway point for a particular development? So here's how you can go ahead to plan around this, okay? So set a walkaway price over there, and this walkaway price really isn't down to all this qualitative or quantitative research that you've done in terms of the development. Okay, what you should do is to look up for the alternatives. Okay, so once it hits, for example, right, 3-bedder, 2.6M, 2.7M, right, the cheapest guy is 2.1M, you are looking at 2.6M, $500,000 above the guy already. In the market, are there any other alternatives at 2.6, 2.7M? If you don't really have, better alternatives, then okay, fair enough, right? You want to stretch a little bit, not too bad, right? Speak to your agent, start to plan, okay, at this entry price, is it we have to hold a little bit longer, but end of the day, you're still buying into a fundamentally sound area. And as I given you the example earlier on, some of the higher floor units take a shorter amount of time to sell. They are easy to sell. Can you make back this premium in the resale market, right? Because you also don't want to fall into another trap, but you keep walking away because of an arbitrary walk-away price, but there's no good alternatives in the market, and then you end up just chasing launch after launch after launch from setting a arbitrary walk-away price that may or may not be realistic. And with that, we've come to the end of our review. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have, we'll be really thankful if you could hit that like and subscribe button, as you help out the channel a ton and give us some extra motivation to continue putting out content like that. And so if you'd like to find out more about Penrith, drop us a text. We'll send over the information once they are made available. Or if you'd like to just check out some of our research or some of the collaterals that we have for our buyers, sellers, and investors. So here's a look at what we do for our clients before, during, and after a launch, because FOMO is well and truly upon us, and it's extremely important to plan properly prior to a launch, else you might make a mistake. And here's some photos of the clients that have successfully secured their units together with us. So if you resonate with our data-driven systematic approach to portfolio planning, property purchases, feel free to drop us a text. We'll be happy to help you out. And with that, we've come to the end of this video. If you've enjoyed it, we'll be really thankful if you could hit that like and subscribe button, because you'll help out the channel a ton and to give us a little bit more motivation to put out content like that. If not, till next time, bye-bye.